Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining today's Ascendus Masterminds for Managers webinar. I'm Lauren Young of Freshly Baked Communications, and today I'll be moderating a webinar that is part of a series of interactive experiences with a trusted industry expert on the topic of onboarding. This expert was carefully selected to provide innovative insights, to boost employee performance, and also to promote learning across various industries. Our topic today is First Impressions That Last, how to build engagement via new hire orientation. And Nicole DeFalco, founder of Right Influence, will lead our discussion this morning. Welcome, Nicole.
Hey, Lauren. Thank you so much. Hi, all on the line. Thank you for joining us.
Wonderful. So if you have joined our Mastermind for Managers webinars before, you are aware that these are brought to you by the Chicago-based firm Ascendus Learning Connections, which was founded by learning management expert Sue Drake. Our goal is to provide you with timely presentations that can be expanded into customized learning modules for your organization. And in turn, we hope that you can use this information to build supplemental partnerships for your organization and also to generate new growth and progress. The Mastermind for Managers webinar series gives you the opportunity to do three different things. First, we want you to meet a subject matter expert who can potentially help you solve a business challenge that's currently facing your organization. Two, you can experience firsthand a possible solution for your organization. You have the opportunity to test the waters with this expert before recommending the option internally. And then number three, you get to see one of our experts in action to make sure he or she is a good fit for your organization in terms of style, personality, and approach. So just a few housekeeping rules before we begin. Please keep your phones on mute to eliminate any background noise during our conference. You will have the opportunity to ask questions with our expert at the end of the webinar. In the meantime, if you do have a question or if you'd like to submit additional comments to Nicole or I during the presentation, you are welcome to participate by using the chat feature, which you can find at the lower left-hand corner of your screen. There will also be a Q&A session at the end of the webinar where Nicole will be happy to answer as many questions as she can during our allotted time. So here's what's playing in today's webinar. We're going to start off with a challenge of the day, followed by our famous Test the Water segment. This allows you to test drive a sample consulting engagement with Nicole. And then finally, we'll wrap today's presentation with the What's the Buzz segment. We'd love to get your feedback and answer any questions you may have. Okay. And we have a special new game that we play throughout the webinar just to make sure that we keep this mood very light and interactive. This is our term of the day. So during each webinar this year, we unveil a new term, Wheel of Fortune style, as you can see here. The first person to submit the correct answer in the chat field will win 2 entries in our end-of-year drawing for a complimentary training facilitated by one of our Ascendus experts, such as Nicole. So don't worry if you can't guess the term yet. We will flash this slide again with more letters filled in during today's webinar. So best of luck to you. Also, you are welcome to submit your questions via Twitter at DrakeAscendus. And be sure to use the hashtag AscendusMM. So for those of you that are listening only to the webinar today and you're not viewing it live, this is a great way for you to stay included in our conversation. All right, so we're getting ready to start our webinar. To give you some details on your host this morning, I serve as the CEO and founder of Freshly Baked Communications, which is a brand marketing strategy and content writing firm that specializes in creating memorable brand messaging across the world. I'm a 4-time award-winning author and also a recent recipient of the Daily Herald Entrepreneurial Excellence Award. So Nicole, you've lived in the Chicago area for almost 30 years now, starting when you came out here to go to Northwestern University. So I already know you're originally from New York, so I'm hoping you can weigh in on this age-old debate. Who has the better pizza, Nicole, New York, or Chicago?
Oh, you know, what a way to start, right? By alienating half the audience right out of the gate. But I have to go with New York. I'm sorry. Pizza is meant to be folded. So definitely New York. But now I have been out here longer than I was in New York, so I am a big fan of a good deep dish. So
Oh,
it's
fantastic. Okay, so if you do like deep dish, which is your favorite out here?
I got to go with Lou Malnati's. Got to go Lou Mal.
Okay.
It's a good one.
Okay, well, we can be friends again. All right, I'm for Lou Malnati's. Okay, so one more question before we get into your challenge of the day. On Twitter, I realized that your profile has a picture of two huge rhinos blocking a road instead of your profile picture. And I think your description said something about ask you about the rhino. So tell us what's up with these rhinos.
What's up with the rhinos? So yeah, those rhinos actually are on my laptop, my desktop as well. My kids are like, other people have pictures of their children, but the rhinos actually remind me of every day what I do. So I always think about, people at work just, kind of going down a road, and they're told to go down a road, and there's a certain destination that their company needs to get them to, or needs them to get to, in terms of performance and outcomes. And all of a sudden, you're going along the way, and there are the rhinos in the road. And my job is to help figure out, what knowledge, attitude, skills, and habits do people need to improve upon in order to clear the rhinos out of the way so they can get going towards their goals and objectives. So that's what's with the rhinos.
I love it. What a great analogy. And that's a great way to start the conversation instead of something traditional that we've seen. So fantastic.
Yeah, it definitely sparks a good combo, so that's for sure.
All right, so everyone, before Nicole begins, I would like to let you know that she has a very special giveaway for you at the end of this presentation. So be sure to pay close attention to what she's about to share. Take it away, Nicole.
Okay. Great. Well, we always like to start our webinars out with the challenge of the day, right? So there's a business reason why we're going to focus on the discussion of onboarding. So let's take a look at that. First, we're going to use a poll to get that started. So approximately what percentage of employees in their jobs less than 6 months are already searching for their next position? What do you think? And everybody is free to go ahead and vote, and let's see what we come up with.
All right, so I'm watching all the responses come in, Nicole. I'll give everybody about 5 more seconds. 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's see what the answers are.
Okay, what we come up with here. So we had about 20% of the people said it was 20%, 60 said 30%, and another 20 said 40. Those of you who said 30%, you are spot on. So 30% of people who've only been in their job for 6 months are already looking. Let's kind of take a look and see what the economics of that really looks like here. So that means on average, companies are losing 1 in 6 of their new hires each month for the first 3 months. So that has a huge impact on the business, and we'll use another poll to kind of get a sense of what that is. What is the estimated cost to replace an employee? Anybody know what that stat is? So we'll go ahead, take a vote. Is it 3 months worth of salary, 6 months salary, 1 year's salary, or 2 times their annual salary to replace an employee? Go ahead and weigh in, and let's see how people do here.
Okay, these responses came in much more quickly
well,
than the
everyone's
last
getting used
one.
to the technology now, right? We're not getting accustomed.
For sure. I'm going to click Submit for the results. And what do you see on your end, Nicole?
I see that we had about 50% of the people thought it was 6 months. We had 40% at 1 year. And the 10%ers who said 2 times annual salary, those are actually the ones who are right. It is 2 times, that's the estimate, 2 times an annual salary to replace an employee. So I want you just to stop a moment and do the math for your organization. What kind of an impact is turnover having on your bottom line? And not only the bottom line. I mean, let's think about that. If you've got 30% of employees leaving after only 6 months and it costs about 2 times salary to replace them, but there's also a ripple effect on morale, productivity, and your brand reputation. When same jobs keep coming up over and over and over again on Indeed and Monster, people notice that, and it does impact the brand. So the good news is, the reason why we're here at this webinar is because onboarding can make a difference. Companies with standard onboarding processes experience 54% greater new hire productivity. Those with the longest onboarding programs gain full proficiency 34% faster than those in the shortest programs. That's a 4-month difference. And companies with a good onboarding process have about 50% greater new hire retention. So companies with a strong, longer-range onboarding process attract and retain better talent, have higher productivity levels, and better overall employee satisfaction and engagement. So when we go into test the waters, we're going to look at how to create an effective onboarding process so your organizations can start to experience some of these benefits. We'll take a pause, though, before we get into test the waters, just to see. Anybody want to take a shot at our phrase of the day, our term of the day?
So we have not received any correct responses yet. You are welcome to try as many times as you would like, so you're not out if you guess incorrectly.
Keep going. We'll give you a few more hints as we go along. We were a little tough on this one, so
sure.
Kudos to those who get it. Okay, so we're going to go into test the waters. So from the challenge of the day, we learned that an effective onboarding process improves employee engagement, retention, helps save money, increase productivity, and creates a reputation that attracts top talent. Lots of benefits to it. But what makes an onboarding process effective? And then how do we go about creating this type of experience for our new hires? So we're going to dive right into that. Let's start out, first kind of looking at what we mean by an effective onboarding process. And I want you guys to start this by thinking about your own best onboarding experience. In the chat, share some examples of what sticks out most in your memory when you think about your best onboarding experience. Okay, and while you guys are filling in some ideas in the chat, I just want to tell you honestly, it's amazing to me, but when I tried to do this for myself and think back on my own best onboarding experience, it occurred to me I cannot remember any formal onboarding at all. I mean, as best that I can remember is there were some introductions, there was some paperwork, and then I just remember like sitting at a desk with like, here, read all this information, and just kind of very isolated in reading. I think I had one job at a .com where we played Worms. It's a video game at lunch. That was probably my best onboarding because we all kind of bonded right away. So what are some of the stories that, let's see, Lauren shared with us that she met the CEO of Kraft on her first day as an intern. And then she said she was surprised to learn that she was a lot like me in college and rose through the ranks quickly. That's really cool. That is very good. Let's see some other examples. What else we have here? A plan working with others that have started together, building a network. Okay.
Sure.
We've got Kate says, my mentor contacted me before our first meeting and kept in touch throughout the first week. Wow, that's really nice. That's high touch. That's really good. Okay, so we've got some good examples, right? I gave the bad example, right? My best is just, playing a video game. But again, bonding with coworkers was good, and then having somebody there to answer your questions and stay in touch. I love the CEO meeting right with the interns. I mean, that's very, very impressive. So that is very good. Well, it's interesting because, thank you all for sharing, by the way. We'll, as much as possible, we'll keep the dialogue going here. When they looked at, if you remember the Challenger Day, we talked about that 30% of new hires, looking for a new job in the first 6 months. When they actually talked to people who did walk away from a position within the first 6 months, and they asked what would have prevented them from leaving, this is kind of a list of some of the things that they said. Receiving clear guidelines regarding responsibilities, more effective training, a friendly smile or helpful coworker, which we had an example of that in the chat, being recognized for unique contributions, more attention from a manager and coworkers. And then the way I look at this, the last bullet was an effective onboarding process. But honestly, I think if you look at these top 5, right, I mean, that really becomes the definition of what we mean by effective onboarding. So it's like the top ones sort of add up to that idea of an effective onboarding process. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at kind of 4 ways to create that effective onboarding process. And the first part of this, as we dive in, is we want to be sure that if you implement any of the ideas we share, you're going to have the greatest likelihood for success. So the first thing we'll talk about is a winning strategy for implementing the changes. And then we'll look at these 3 highly actionable ways to make onboarding impactful for the business and the new hire. And that's positioning, alignment, and design. So let's first consider what might derail us just as we're getting started. And I think you're going to appreciate anyone who's had to help get things changed in an organization knows how this feels. There's a guy pushing another guy with his arms crossed. But if you try to stop completely what's being done in the business today and replace it with a different approach, you're going to run the risk of triggering high resistance. And in the chat, what are some reasons for that? So if you stop completely what's being done, you just do we're no longer doing that, here's the new way that we're going to do it, chances are you're going to trigger resistance. And why is that? Anybody want to chime in on the chat? What do you think?
So Nicole, sure. I'll just give you my perspective. I really feel that people can be very afraid of change in a corporate setting. A lot of people deal with issues all the time, and they may feel that some of the changes are unnecessary, and they may not want to disrupt the status quo. I've seen that in corporate. I don't know if you've seen that as well.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. I mean, it's especially with the rate of change and the amount of change that happens, a lot of people, especially if they don't see the value of onboarding, they're going to say, just check the boxes. Stop worrying about this. Like, of all the things in the world, why are we worrying about that, right, if they don't really get it? In the chat, we had time and cost of adopting the change, right? That can become daunting for people as well. That's a good point. Again, it becomes like one more thing. Things that I have seen is that a lot of times the onboarding process that's in place has been there for a while, so there's a lot of ownership. So when you start to talk about making a wholesale change, what happens is the people who had been involved in the current practice kind of feel like the need to defend the status quo to save face. So not only is it sort of that fear of change or moving off the status quo, there's also a personal side. Like, now I have to admit that maybe what we had in place wasn't good, and that's a reflection on me. So you have to kind of ease into that. A lot of times people perceive it as a loss, that something is being taken away, that you're threatening their access to the new hire, or their content won't be as prominent as it was, things like that. So given that we want to have buy-in and make the new approach to onboarding part of the culture, what we recommend is to use a do less of this and more of this strategy, and I'll show you what I mean by that. It's kind of, if you're familiar with the dieting book that's out there, that's don't eat this, don't eat that, eat this, which really is brilliant, right? Because if you tell me not to eat something, think about that, right? If I told you, like, no Twizzlers ever again, that's probably all you'll obsess on. And, in fact, I guarantee everyone's going to have a Twizzler later today. But so if you tell me I can't have it, that's exactly what I want. So this book is great because what they do is they say, well, don't eat that, and then they replace it with something else. So people have this sense of being left whole. There's no loss. So playing off that, what we recommend is to ease your organization into the change. Start doing less of the things that are ineffective and implementing more of the things that enhance the impact of your onboarding process. Okay, so it's like, if you can almost imagine like balancing, right? So you're sort of easing off of one side and easing into the other. So people have this feeling that there's not a loss. It's almost actually a feeling of a net gain by the time you're done with it. So that's the winning strategy for how to get the changes implemented. And now let's start looking at what those changes are. And we're going to focus first on positioning. So let's go to the polls again. What's the better positioning for onboarding? Is it the last step in the hiring process, or is it better to position it as the first step in the overall employee experience? I'll have you guys kind of chime in and vote here. What do you think?
This is a very interesting question, and I'm watching the responses come in now, so I don't want to spoil the surprise.
Yeah, this is an interesting one, isn't it?
For sure. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the final results.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
All right. Wow, we were almost at a 50-50, and then first step in the employee experience just got right ahead, right? Had a good press conference and tipped over to the 50, 55, almost 56% mark. So that is exactly right. Yeah, I mean, that's what you want to do, is start to position onboarding less as the last step in the hiring process and start to socialize and embed it in the culture, this belief that onboarding is really the first step in the employee experience. And it's interesting, there's kind of two things that happen. When we position onboarding as the first step in an overall employee experience, everyone comes together to make that first day fun and memorable and heartwarming, right? So we really have this like it's a powerful thing. We always want to start strong. So instead of looking at it as the last part of something, if you look at it at the first, everybody really kind of rallies around that first moment. But then what happens is people get creative on ways to make that honeymoon feeling last as long as possible. And they really start to chip in to the process of keeping the good vibe going. So let's take a look now. If this is what we want to do, more of this, more of socializing it as the first step in an overall employee experience, we're going to look at some techniques for that. As I go through the techniques for positioning, alignment, and design, when I discuss something you feel your organization does well, just put a note in the chat, we do that. I'm very big these days. It's very high, a positive organizational psychology, right? Deming in the 80s, we're all looking at the abyss, trying to close the gap. Well, you know what, we're in a new millennium, and we're going to look at our strengths and build upon them. So what I'd like you to do is if I mention something and you say, hey, we do that, go ahead and put a we do that in the chat, and Lauren will kind of help keep track of how many we do that's we get. Okay, so going into positioning, again, the positioning has to do with making onboarding the first step in the overall employee experience. So one of the first things you want to do is make sure that the team knows that the new hires are coming. Have everyone send an email or plan to drop by and say hello. I mean, think about that. The first time you log into Outlook or whatever the email platform is, Google, and your inbox is kind of already filled with all these welcome notes. That's a really nice thing. New hires should always be welcomed by senior leaders, and there should be a clear message from the senior leadership of the value of those new hires. So you really want to make sure the senior leader, and again, this takes time, it takes a little bit of work, but make sure that they have a script if they're live, or if there's a video, work it out very nicely. Be very careful about the language that you use. This isn't a time for a lot of detail. This is a time for the senior leadership to say, we value you, we're glad you're here, here's why, set a sense of optimism for where the organization is going, and that's kind of stay at that level. New hires should always be welcomed by their direct manager, ideally face-to-face. If it's in a virtual environment, try to get video going, but you definitely should have that personal welcome from managers. Again, make sure the managers know what to say. Right? They don't necessarily need to, especially on day one, diving right into all the details. But what they should say is they should be telling new hires why they were hired, why they're a great fit, and letting them know that they're welcome. Those are kind of the three key messages that somebody should get on that first day, right? Why you're here, why you're a great fit, and we're so glad you're here. As quickly as possible, also start to establish a sense of predictability and routine. Give people clear agendas, I mean detailed, like every hour of every day, especially in that first week, needs to really be laid out very clearly. Give them directions, a lot of hand-holding. Don't let new hires, it's around the corner and to the left. Walk new hires to where they need to go. I know it sounds like, what are they, kindergarten? No, but it takes a while to get the lay of the land, even if I've been there for some interviews or shadows and things like that. Just, it's worth it. Walk them from place to place. Put invites for regular meetings onto their Outlook calendar. That's a really good one too, because again, they get that sense of being part of a team and having that predictability. Use artifacts to connect them to the culture. Make sure they have branded items on their desk, their computer bag, water bottles. This is really crucial, especially if they're virtual. You want people to have a visible, tangible piece of evidence, right, or pieces of evidence that say, I belong to this organization. I mean, it's kind of funny, but right, they should have the T-shirt as quickly as possible. Don't let people eat alone. Make sure that there's a lot of networking and connection opportunities. And Lauren, you had a great idea for virtual teams. What is it that your team does?
So for my virtual teams, we all enjoy doing a wine night. So if we're working on a virtual team and we're kind of burning the midnight oil, we'll all get a glass of wine or a glass of beer, whatever you prefer. And as we're doing our conference, we'll just kind of have a drink together, even though we're not all in the same area.
That's such a great idea. I love that. Thanks. So, I mean, that's something you can do with your new hires if they're virtual. And doesn't, you can have wine in the afternoon. You could have a coffee break and do it virtually. Maybe have just some fun conversation starter questions to get people to know each other. Another thing that's important, again, in creating this employee experience is giving people a sense of control and accomplishment in that especially across kind of those first 3 months. When you think about it, when you feel out of control and you feel undervalued, that detracts from your perceptions of the experience. So as much as possible, use technology to automate steps and give them a way to track what needs to be done, and keep track of their progress and acknowledge it. So you kind of are turning somewhat administrative tasks actually into milestones that feel really good. And I have to tell you, for as much technology in some of the companies that I've worked for, at the end of the day, a really nicely done Excel spreadsheet with all the things that they need to do that they can just have a downloaded copy of, and they just sort of check the box, and if they need to, they can put it on SharePoint or email it to their manager to say, this is what I've accomplished. Again, when we looked at, I think one of the obstacles to change, somebody had mentioned on the chat, was that time and cost. Well, here's a really low-cost way, and it can have a huge impact. So the other most important thing about this, too, is that, again, it's an overall experience, so keep up the momentum. Think of onboarding as a year-long process. Now, it doesn't have to be as intense as day one, right? You don't need to be walking people to their desks and everywhere they need to go for the first year. But certainly consider people new hires at least until that first anniversary. And acknowledge the milestones along the way, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, and make a really big deal of that 1 year anniversary. Do not let it go unnoticed. And make sure the person's manager is communicating to them what they've accomplished in the year, how they've contributed to the organization, and what they mean to the team and to the organization. Okay, so this really needs to be a heartfelt 1 year anniversary. So how do we do when we do that? So let's see, how many do we get? Oh, we have at least one. Under dining, we do that. That's a great one. So, no, we have more than one. Do we have two?
We have three, yeah. Senior leaders are doing that too. Yeah.
Oh, very good. See, so there's a lot to build on. You have strengths to go, to build from. That's great. So let's do a pulse check on positioning before we move to alignment. Which of these could you adopt at your company to improve the positioning of onboarding? So is it alert and rally ahead of time, the senior leader welcome, predictability, connecting to the culture, communal dining, control and accomplishment, and maintaining momentum? What do you think? Let's get some voting going on here.
Great. And you can select more than one option here. Select as many that you do now. Everyone's chiming in. This is great.
Yeah. People are looking at a lot of different options.
Okay. We're going to go ahead and skip to the results now. Feel free to keep voting if you're still selecting. Okay. What do you see here, Nicole?
This is great. There's some nice, good ones. Alert and rally ahead of time got a lot of votes. That was a really good one to have. And that's an easy one, right? I mean, there's something can be implemented very quickly. Having the senior leader welcome them. And, again, try to structure that as much as possible. There are some senior leaders who are very polished, and they do an amazing job, and there are some who are not quite they are very gregarious, and sometimes they go off into too many tangents or too much detail. So definitely coach them on that as you go. Predictability was a good one. We have everybody can take a little something from the entire list. So that's the best part of it, is that we're giving ideas that everybody can use. So let's look at alignment and what we mean by that. So with alignment, what we're talking about is doing less of treating onboarding as a series of kind of unrelated administrative tasks, as kind of a check-the-box experience, and start treating onboarding more as a strategic asset. Again, from my personal experience, it was really like onboarding with kind of orientation, a few introductions, shown to your desk, given a login, complete some forms, and that was really about the end of it. But if we truly want to use onboarding to improve productivity, efficiency, employee retention, and engagement, then it has to be treated as a strategic asset on par with other leadership development initiatives. That's really important. I'm going to say that again. Treat it on par with other leadership development initiatives. Okay, so we've got, everyone's got the HiPo, the high potential leadership development, and emerging leaders, right? Those are all very significant. Onboarding as a program for the organization has to be elevated to that level of significance. It's just as important. It must be considered and carefully crafted to serve as a means to achieving human capital and performance indicators. So let's look at how we can kind of transform onboarding into a strategic asset. Okay? So remember, as I go through these tips, be sure to let us know when there's something that your company does already with a We Do That, which is really great. Okay, so the first thing is make a sound business case to leadership. Use benchmark statistics as well as company statistics, right? Sometimes benchmark people go, yeah, but you get the yeah buts when you do the outside. So although I have one culture where there is no profit in the homeland and it's all about what happens out in the world. So based on your culture, it's a good bet to have some benchmark stats and some company stats, and we actually provided you with some here today to show how onboarding can contribute to real performance measures. Then work backwards from the business objectives to the performance outcomes or the behaviors. So what do we want them to be doing on the job and when, right? And then you look at, okay, so if that's what I need them to be doing, what do they need to know and be able to do in order to meet those performance outcomes? So now you're going to generate your list of learning objectives. The thing about this is you want to then use those objectives to develop a curriculum, but be creative about it. Use a blended learning approach. You can have some workshops, self-directed learning, a coaching or a buddy system. Somebody mentioned a mentor, on-the-job learning. You definitely want to leverage technology, but not, be careful. You still need the human factor, okay? And then spread that curriculum out, and we'll talk about that a little bit in design. Do not leave it to chance to succeed. You have to really make sure that all who are involved, even peripherally, know the program. Everyone should know the whys and the whats, and this is the most important. Everyone should know how they can contribute. Okay, so if you have to go on a kind of corporate communications campaign about onboarding, it's definitely worth it. Equip managers, coaches, and peers with information and tools. Make it easy for them to play their part. In one program that we created, this was a great example. We had kind of a welcome to onboarding, right? And it was only about a half an hour module. It was instructor-led, could be done face-to-face or virtual, but the interesting thing was we had 3 versions of it, one for the employee, one for the manager, and this was a sales environment where new hires were paired up with a buddy. So there was a version for the buddy. So the only thing that really changed, the content was the same across the 3. It was the point of view changed based on who was in the room. And then all 3 of those had a resource guide that was provided to the participants afterward. And again, resource guide information was tightly aligned and mutually reinforcing for all 3 roles. And the only thing that changed was kind of the perspective or point of view. So for example, there were sample agendas for, let's say, the employee meeting with their buddy for the first time. So they both had an identical agenda. Here's what that first meeting could look like. It's just the preparation steps were a little bit different, whether you were the employee or the buddy. So that was a great way to kind of keep them all tied together. Embed mechanisms into the process to demonstrate progress and impact, and then feed that information back to leadership. In one program that I work on, we've got participants completing a learning action plans throughout the entire one-year curriculum. They're meeting with their supervisor on a regular basis to provide anecdotal information. We have them rating confidence levels on learning objectives across the time. We're getting feedback from them on their overall experience. And we're creating reports periodically and feeding that back to leadership so that they can see the short-term effect, and then we're obviously tracking the success of these employees and their tenure throughout the organization afterwards. Okay? So, Lauren, how'd we do? Did we get any more We Do That?
I'm checking through. We have 1 additional one, so we're up to 4 now.
Oh, wow, that is great. And let's see, we've got somebody said, our alignment process likely falls apart because the learning objectives vary by manager, okay, who may not use HR as a resource, right. And that's really where, to tell you the truth, I'm going to show you in a little while an example of a curriculum that I developed with the engineering group. And interestingly, this company, Human Resources, is real lean in this company. And so we just did the work directly with the engineers. And they really liked it. They actually liked having this process. Once we sort of explained what is a learning objective, just the word understand is not valid. But once they learned that, they really liked the process. We kept it very simple. We didn't get all, mager on them. We just kind of went with what do they need to know, what do they need to be able to do, and then spread that out over time. So you can work at the functional level. You just have to give people the tools to do that. So. And then really helping them, understand what's appropriate for new hires and, not getting too into too much. So actually, that's a great lead-in to where we're going for our next section. So another key to success in creating a good onboarding experience is around design, and that has less to do with kind of hitting them with the fire hose, and it's more about fueling them up. So let me explain what I mean by fueling them up. If you think about, if any of you have ever run a race, and it can be a 5K, you can walk, even in walking, right? In a 5K, a half, a marathon, right? There's always people along the road handing you water, and they're giving you what you need when you need it, right? They're not loading you up with water at the start of the race and saying, here, make this last, right? It's just as you need water, as you need it, as you're going down the road, you're getting what you need. And I want you to keep that image in mind, because that's really what we're trying to do, is give them what they need when they need it. And to talk about what I mean by hitting, we wanted them to do less of fire hose, but what do I mean by that? I'm going to use a story, if any of you ever felt this way. But this is a great story, and this really has resonated for me. And it was a gentleman that I'm working with around the orientation portion, kind of that first day of an onboarding program. And our team member, Dan, I'll call him, he regaled us with this great memory of his first day with the company. And he said it was so overwhelming that he had a migraine that, by the time he got home, the headache just, nailed him to the floor. If you can imagine, right, he's a young guy, new job, right? So he's in this empty apartment, and he's lying there out with this migraine, and he had begged his neighbor to go to the store to get him Tylenol or whatever. So, and incidentally, this same onboarding program has an actual slide that they put up in front of the participants of a crowd of people being hit by a fire hose, kind of as a warning. So that became our mantra of, what not to do. So let me ask you, what do you think? What was Dan's biggest complaint with the experience? Was it that there were too long between breaks on that first day, that his questions weren't answered, or was it too much information too soon? What do you guys think?
I think this will be pretty much a runaway question here.
I think I made this one a little on the obvious with the story, right? Okay.
For sure. Let's go ahead to the results. Yeah.
There we go. Right, 100%. Absolutely. Dan said he was totally overwhelmed by the amount of information. The interesting thing is he said much of it was difficult to understand because he didn't have the context. What a lot of times happens in onboarding is we take content from other areas of the company, and we pull it into onboarding. Oh, there was this great video that came out. Oh, we just did a class on that for the salespeople. Bring that content in. So we're drawing on existing sources, but those programs and that learning or that information was tailored to somebody who's been with the company. There's an assumption of common understanding, right, that you sort of know the family inside jokes already, right? So now we can, there's shorthands and things that are being used, and that's part of what makes it really overwhelming. So let's take a look at, what we should do more of then when it comes to design. And again, I have a lot to cover with this, but I do want to keep it interactive. So please continue to put your comments and questions in the chat, and then Lauren, flag me if I get going down the path too far, and if there's something that I can address from the group. So
problem.
When we look at design, right, what we're really trying to do, what is success? It is getting our new hires into the deep end with their tenured peers, kind of swimming as well as everybody else. That's what success is. But that's not where success starts. Success actually starts more in the shallow end. So when you look at the design of your curriculum for your onboarding, parse information into digestible amounts and levels. Think of it more as wading in. So though you want them in the deep end with their tenured peers as fast as possible, throwing them in the deep end is counterproductive, right? So, you guys can put this in the chat, but what happens when you throw someone who can't swim in the deep end of a pool? Really, there's another obvious one. We should get 100% in the chat on that one. What happens if you throw somebody who can't swim into the deep end of a pool, right?
I would say they're not your friend anymore.
Right, yeah, exactly. Panic. Keiko's panic. Absolutely, right? They're not your friend anymore. They're panicked. They feel really badly about themselves. So if I don't drown, which sometimes you almost wish you would, because if it's a really crowded pool and you're the one flailing around in the deep end and then you're pulled out, you're embarrassed, you feel badly, you don't like the person who threw you in, and you certainly aren't fond of the experience, right? Chances are you won't go back to that pool, right? So keep that in mind, right? Often organizations want to throw people into the deep end because they're impatient for results. But the reality is allowing them to wade in, starting from the shallow end, is more likely to get them swimming on their own in the deep end faster. Okay, so throwing them into the deep end, counterproductive, letting them wade through, you're actually going to get them up to the level of proficiency that you need faster. And those statistics that we had during the challenge of the day prove that out, right? In some cases, you can get them proficient 4 months faster by having a stronger, longer-term onboarding process. Okay, so in design, structure, that well-paced, learner-centered curriculum, again, based on those learning objectives, directly linked to performance outcomes. A key there, too, is make sure there's line of sight to the performance outcomes. Make sure your learners know what's expected of them. Keep in mind, people retain information better when it's in smaller chunks, spaced out, with opportunities for recall. This is a key thing that they found. We always build in quizzes, and we think that we're testing. The quiz itself is sort of the end, like what was your score, right? But actually, the recall process, bringing information up from long-term memory and bringing it forward, that actually helps to solidify it in long-term memory. So just the act of recollection, whether I'm right or wrong on how I answer the question, just opportunities for recall help solidify it in long-term memory. Schedule and trigger and disseminate learning over that extended period of time, ideally a year. What that allows you to do is to naturally layer in that complexity over time, get some repetition going and reinforcement. So it's very powerful to do it that way. Okay? And I'll show you, I had mentioned I was going to share a sample curriculum. Okay, so this is an example of a curriculum similar to what we use to run an accelerated development program for mechanical engineers, newly hired right out of college. The content and instruction comes from within the organization and also from select external experts, including several of our Ascendus Learning Connection experts, so a real team process there. Throughout the entire year, we leverage e-learning, coaching, on-the-job learning. The workshops are highly interactive. We have recall quizzes. They're pretty frequent. They're almost every day at the start, and then they go to, after the first month, they go to once a week all the way through. There's action learning assignments, and there's a capstone challenge. It's a real-world project that they're handed at the beginning, and they work on all the way until the end of their onboarding experience. So each unbold item is what we call a module. And so a module is one of those blended learning experiences. So for example, like equipment. Actually, I've used equipment as one of them. I don't even have that one on here. But under product basics. Under product basics, we've got a module called equipment. And that starts with participants using a reflection worksheet to prepare for and then follow up on some e-learning. And then they have an interactive workshop where they bring that reflection worksheet in, so there's sort of a carryover from the self-directed into the instructor-led environment. And then the facilitator works with them to build on that knowledge from the e-learning and provides them with more hands-on opportunities around the equipment. And then it also includes reinforcement with visits to company facilities to see some of the equipment in action, and then they debrief those meetings with their supervisor. Industry sectors is a fun one. Instead of just putting them through a whole bunch of go to our website and read this or go through this e-learning and read that, we actually give them a set of questions to answer. They do some research and develop a 10-minute presentation on the company's industry and their customers. The great part about that is we then have a baseline of their presentation skills. So the presentation skills facilitator sits in. He gets that baseline. Then we provide them presentation skills training. And then we use presentations as a way to reinforce that skill throughout. Core values and ethics is another topic that's reinforced throughout the entire year. So embedded in a lot of the different workshops or even in the action learning are kind of ethical or value challenges where they have to apply the code of ethics and the company core values to real-world business decisions. So they get some practice with that before they get out there in the world. Okay, and then even the on-the-job learning, which are rotations, almost like a hospital. They go through these rotations. They are about 8 weeks each. And what we do is we have a set of learning objectives tied to those, and we work with the rotation leads to make sure that they know what those learning objectives are, and they pick projects and tasks aligned to the learning objectives. So everything is very structured. It's not like, look, here are 2 of our new hires, keep them busy. It's very strategic, and it's a great, having the rotations is a great way for the people in those departments to work side by side with these new hires and decide, is this somebody who I might want to bring into my group. So it's a really interesting model. Okay, so a couple of more things on design, and we'll wrap this up. Especially early on in the onboarding process, really focus less on cramming information into their heads and really look at capturing their hearts. And I'll give you some examples of what I mean by capturing their hearts. And it's so important because, honestly, people do not make decisions. We're not rational, right? We actually make decisions based on our limbic system. That's our base for emotions. It doesn't even have language. It's a part of our brain without language. That's why sometimes if you ask somebody why they did something and they're like, I don't know, it was an emotional decision. We then look for confirming evidence. We then sort of turn to our rational brain to support the decision we've already made emotionally. So you really want to tap into those emotions, and I'll give you some examples. When we teach about the core values in the onboarding process, what we try to do is get participants to also think about their own personal set of values. And a lot of times people have a set of values that they operate against, and they're not necessarily that salient for them. So we create a space for them to think about their own personal values and then make it a direct connection between what they feel and believe and what's important to them and the company values. And that's a great way to make them feel really good about their decision, like I really belong here, right? They think the way I think, what I value, they value. We have used activities with some really great discussion questions, getting people to kind of outwardly express what they're most excited about. We ask them to say, what most excites you about working here? These are great questions that we use. What are you best known for? So we get people to kind of think about where they've been successful before, what are they best known for, and then we have them talk about how they could use that here in this company. So they're bringing in all that past success, and now they're anticipating how they can use it. Very big also on having participants somewhere in the onboarding process really work on their profile. Most companies nowadays have some form of an intranet where you can put your employee profile up there. If they don't, I know a lot of companies will use Facebook or even LinkedIn. But you want to make sure that people have a good way to introduce themselves that's compelling and different and not just, hi, I'm Nicole. I've been doing instructional design for 25 years, right? I mean, you don't want that. You want, hey, you know what? I think about my job like getting 2 rhinos out of the road, right? I mean, that's a little bit more interesting. It doesn't necessarily have to be that, not everybody needs a rhino story. But something like that where they're really kind of thinking through their personal branding is another good activity that's a powerful way to include that into the design. Make sure there's lots of networking and collaboration activities. Get them bonded to each other as a group. That's an important factor. If people come in together, if you're fortunate enough to have that where you have a cohort, really bond them. People will stay with an organization where they feel that they have friends and there's a loyalty to friends. So ultimately we want loyalty to the company, but if you can establish some personal bonding that goes on, that'll help reinforce and up the retention rate. So I'll give you an example. Partners in Development, who is an Ascendus Learning Connection expert, provided a program called Living Locally, Working Globally in one of our onboarding programs. And Lee Johnson, the facilitator, had the participants interview peers, from the company. So they could interview folks that they've already met, or they could use this as a way to introduce themselves to somebody else. But they had to interview on, people's experience working virtually and then bring that input into a debrief with him. So that was very powerful. Not only did they learn about, what it means to work virtually in that environment, but they also then got to introduce themselves and get to know some people. Another thing that's really important is positive frames. So the best example I can give for that is one company had a code of ethics, and it had originally been positioned very legalistically. This is policy 1004, and here's why you need to know policy 1004, and here's policy whatever. And it, was a little bit dry. Be polite about that. A little dry. And then it was also just intimidating. So what we did with that was we reframed it. So it was, hey, listen, we have your back. Wherever you are in the world, we have your back. And this is how the company supports you. And if you're going to be our ambassador, your behavior matters. And by the way, so does ours. And it was a really nice way to put it. So, and spark their curiosity. I mean, definitely, you can make things challenging and interesting. You just have to balance it out, and you don't want it to be overwhelming. Okay, so Lauren, do we have any more We Do That?
We are still at 4. However, Kate did mention that herding cats is also a little bit overused when it comes to some of these that you mentioned.
There you go. All right. So let's take a look at this. Which of these is, as we wrap up, which of these is most important for your company to focus on to improve the onboarding experience? Is it, kind of coming up with a good winning strategy, positioning, alignment, design, or all of the above?
Okay,
and we got another We Do That, by the way.
All right, we're up to 5. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to move ahead to the results.
Okay, great. Look at that. So we've got almost 70% saying it's an all of the above. That is great. Definitely, if it's an all of the above was your answer, prioritize. Maybe start with the strategy. Make sure you kind of are figuring out how you're going to balance out what you're going to do less of with what you're going to do more of, and then prioritize the other options as you go. So very good. So I'll just give you, some inspiration here, right? So if you look at some of the comments on the screen, wow, I feel so welcome. I'm so glad I decided to work here. They really are looking out for me. I belong here. I have what I need to succeed here. This is how you want your new hires to feel, because the impression onboarding leaves on people is going to greatly affect their perceptions of the company, how quickly they get engaged and become productive, and how long they're going to stay. So the most successful leaders and organizations have as a strategic asset a robust onboarding process, thoughtfully designed and maintained to enculturate new employees, equip them to be productive as quickly as possible, capture their hearts, and earn their loyalty. So I hope this helps you achieve all of that. And Lauren, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Perfect, Nicole. Thank you so much. Now we want to hear a little bit more from you on the phone or through the chat field. What did you come away with during this webinar? This is our What's the Buzz segment. So if there's an example, a statistic, a statement that made you pause or think about your organization, we'd love for you to share some of your last-minute thoughts with us in the chat field one more time. And everyone who shares a comment or a question for Nicole will receive one additional entry in our end-of-the-year drawing for the complimentary training with one of our experts. Okay? Before we wrap for the day, here's our term of the day with a few more letters filled in. Go ahead and guess.
I think we got one.
We've got one. Congratulations, Kristen. You are correct. The term of today is strategic onboarding. Very, very good. All right. So as we're waiting for the additional questions to come in, I would like to invite you to check out our brand new website, drake-resources.com. Here you can view everything listed here on the slide from past webinars, the full expert listing, which includes Nicole DeFalco, and blog articles which can be helpful to help you grow your business as well. Also, the discussion does not end here today. You can continue the conversation with our experts and the other members of the call on LinkedIn. I'd like to invite you to join the Ascendus Masterminds for Managers group. And before and after each webinar, we do have Q&A and opportunities for discussion related to today's topic. Here's a brief snapshot of the Ascendus Masterminds for Managers webinar schedule. You can see that our next webinar will be Wednesday, September 16th. Then we have another one coming up October 7th, and then finally the end of the year we'll have one on November 4th. Okay. So I'm getting a lot of thanks. This information is so helpful. Thanks, Kristen. Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Kate. Everybody, a lot of K's today. Everybody saying the information has been very helpful. No real questions, so I think you did a fantastic job, Nicole.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you for hosting. You always do such a wonderful job yourself as moderator.
Oh, thank you. All right. So I've looked at the chat. I have looked at Twitter. I don't see any additional comments or questions, so I'd like to thank you all so much for your participation in the question and answer session and the Ascendus Masterminds for Managers webinar. Nicole and I would like to say thanks on behalf of the entire Ascendus team for your participation, and we do hope that you learned something new that you can share with your team, and that you'll begin to implement some of today's tactics to retain your top talent this year as well. Take care, and we'll see you on LinkedIn.